So I was setting up an Instagram post earlier on this morning, Throwback Thursday and all that, and I came across this awesome screenshot by Burdu, and it's of Bad Company 2 Vietnam. It's a really striking image, and it got me thinking a little bit. For those that aren't aware, Bad Company 2 was my first major Battlefield game that I ever played. I did mess around with the original Bad Company just a little bit, but I didn't really get that much of a feel for it. And ever since then, I've not really felt that any other Battlefield game has really encapsulated what made Bad Company 2 so damn awesome. One part of that was the map design and the rush game mode. To this day, and I guess this is rather a bold statement, but I do believe it, there haven't been any greater rush maps than the ones included in Bad Company 2. For me, they are just perfection. You've probably already noticed this, but I'll bring it up anyway. The server I was playing on today, the footage that's in the background, you can see that server was clearly modded, because in the right-hand bottom corner, the ammo count is just off the charts. This presented a little bit of a weird scenario in the server, because it didn't feel like what I remember Bad Company 2 feeling like, but because we all had this max ammo modification to our guns, I think the gameplay was still pretty balanced in the end. It was just a little bit more explodey and chaotic than I remember it being. It's still pretty awesome, but it's definitely not representative of what Rush in Bad Company 2 was actually like. I've just got it there for background gameplay. These Rush maps, though, the first reason as to why Bad Company 2 was just so much better for this game mode. The maps were designed to work with Rush. You've got Isla Inocentes, Laguna Presa, Arica Harbour, White Pass, Cold War, Nelson Bay. All of these were designed to work with Rush, first and foremost. And when you've got a map that's designed to work around a game mode that you want to play, I think 9 times out of 10, you're going to find that the game mode works very well. After Bad Company 2, for whatever reason, DICE decided to take the approach of making maps in Battlefield titles work on every single game mode that they included in the game, as opposing to just focusing on the ones it was designed to work on. And that essentially changed the fundamentals of map design within the Frostbite titles and then the entire franchise. We see that this issue comes up in Battlefield 1. The new night map, Nivelle Nights, is designed in such a way that all of the game modes will eventually work on it, but some of them won't work very well. Conquest was really not very well implemented on that map, but because all maps have to work with all game modes, I think compromises are made in the map design of the more recent Battlefield titles. Bad Company 2, to an extent, didn't have that issue. If you wanted to play a game mode, you got to play it on maps that worked for that game mode. Even if you did want to play Conquest, there were maps in Bad Company 2 that were specifically designed to work for Conquest. Panama Canal, you've got the Hydro Dam section of Laguna Presa. Laguna Alta, that was an awesome Conquest map. But the developers didn't go and shoehorn game modes into maps that didn't work with them. They just left it as it was, and it was made very clear to players that they would only make maps for certain game modes. Later on in the DLCs, they did manage to put certain game modes on different maps, but they only used sections of the maps that really worked in that scenario. So there was the same chain of thought the entire time. Rather than sitting through an entire loop of all of the maps on Rush, with maybe only 4 of the 10 really working properly, your entire Rush rotation was simply full of maps that were great on the Rush game mode. And for me, that's a far better experience as a player. Second thing, the M-COMs. In Bad Company 2, the M-COM stations themselves were a little bit different to what they are today in Battlefield 1, and in Battlefield 3 and 4 for that matter. The M-COMs in Bad Company 2 were able to be damaged, and they knocked time off of the detonator if you went and then armed the M-COM after you damaged it. So you could fire RPGs at it, you could throw grenades at it, C4 on top of it and blow it up if you wanted to. They take some damage, and then you could arm it after, and they take less time to explode. And this meant you could use different tactics to play the enemy in a different way. Instead of needing to be all sneaky and trying your best not to be seen around the M-COM, you could actually take the full frontal approach and just smash your way in if you wanted to. Rather than whittling down the enemy team by numbers until a route to the M-COM was completely clear, you could send in explosives, you could damage the crate, and then storm in with your squad and set the detonator. Prepare to hunker down and defend it. But because you damaged it, you wouldn't have to wait for as long for it to explode, and you'd need to defend it for less time. And that can be really helpful if all the enemies are just pouring back in from their spawn point. You don't get that in the current games, and even though towards the end of Bad Company 2 and still now in this modded server, the damage time reduction was slightly abused a little bit, the game did actually directly encourage you to do that. Some of the M-COM stations were set in the upstairs of houses, and if you could destroy the lower walls, the house would come crashing down and you'd destroy the M-COM with it. You didn't need to even arm the M-COM in Bad Company 2, and you could PTFO in an entirely different way. That adds a different dynamic to the gameplay, and it's one that I actually really miss from the newer versions of the rush mode that we've got now. If you were to add some destructibility to the M-COMs in Battlefield 1, and maybe only have the game mode running on maps that actually work for it, say the more linear ones like Argonne Forest, or ones that have got a natural flowing progression across the map, then I think you'd have a much better experience. But because Battlefield 1's map design isn't geared in the same way as Bad Company 2, you still get these annoyances even on linear maps. For example, Suez Rush, the first set of M-COMs, the defending team can just run up a hill at the start and snipe directly into the attacking team's spawn. There's no cover, nowhere for them to hide. It's essentially cattle to the slaughter. It's not fun. Bad Company 2 removed those annoyances to a certain extent and set the expectation that the game mode you were playing had been fully vetted to work on the map that you were playing. It wasn't 100% foolproof, and there are, of course, still some areas that needed some work, but overall, it was much better than what we have right now in Battlefield 1. The game mode Rush in Battlefield 1 barely exists. I cannot see many servers running it at all on the PC version. It might be much more populated on the consoles, but I haven't had a look on there personally. I think there's going to be a day in the not too distant future that I assume the servers for Battlefield Bad Company 2 will finally be switched off. The game has been out for over 7 years now, and for me, hands down, it still offers one of the best infantry combat experiences in the entire franchise. For sure, it's very clunky, it's much slower paced than a game like Battlefield 1, which was specifically designed to be faster and snappier, but there's something about it for me that's never going to have it knocked off of the top spot. It'll always be my favourite Battlefield game, I think, and I'm pretty confident it will always be my favourite FPS game. It does make me kind of worried that at some point in the future, DICE is going to try and finish off this series with Bad Company 3. There's still a storyline to be finished, the campaign ended on a cliffhanger, and I'd really like to see them give it a go, but because the franchise has evolved so much now, I think it'd lose what made the previous games so special. Bad Company 2 was made in a very different time for the FPS genre. There's virtually no weapon customization beyond a red dot sight or an ACOG. There's virtually no soldier customization either, besides one DLC kit called Spec Act, which changed the camos on the weapons and gave you a different soldier outfit. There's barely any progression or unlocking in the game, bar the weapons and their limited attachments. Overall, it was just a simpler time, and by today's standards, most gamers would probably say this game lacks content. But that's exactly what made Bad Company 2 so great, in my opinion. It was a simple formula, but unfortunately, most gamers these days expect far more than what Bad Company 2 can offer. And if DICE go ahead and make Bad Company 3, I feel it's going to be very, very different from the last installment that came out over 7 years ago now. So at one point, Rush was the best game mode in the entire franchise in my opinion, but since then the mode has never really hit those heights again. Let me know what you think of all this down below, and if you want me to make some more Bad Company 2 content in the future, leave me a comment down there as well. It's literally my favourite game to play, so any excuse to play it, and I'm going to take it. But until next time, my name is Westie, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.